All right, and we are live. So, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for joining us for our August movie club. I cannot believe that it is August. Tim is here. Fantastic. Um, so, I'm just going to go ahead and do a little bit of housekeeping. I want to apologize for how dark my computer is. I lost my desk light. I'm going to mute Tim really quickly because I'm getting an echo. All right, so time for my little bit of my housekeeping. This is our monthly movie club, but we also have a monthly listening club. Um, this month, that's actually going to happen tomorrow night. So, this is our first club of the month, and then our listening club tomorrow. And then we also have a quarterly book club, which this is our first month of reading. We read them over the 3 months, so we actually won't be meeting until the end of October. So, you have plenty of time to catch up and read Love in the Time of Cholera before we decide to talk about it at the end of October. And if you'd like to join this club or any of our other clubs, just let me know on Facebook. You can find everything that you need in our Facebook group over at Dragonfly Arts. If you're not already a part of the group, you absolutely should be. We do a lot of really, really cool things. We're just an artists group where we talk about what it's like being a creative and working in a creative field and the problems that we deal with. And also, it's just a very supportive group to talk to when you're experiencing some problems or have something fun you want to share. And if you like what we do and you want to support us, we do have a Patreon. You can support us for as little as $2 a month. Everything we offer is open to our Facebook group, but we appreciate any help that you can provide us so that we can continue to run not just these clubs, but also everything else we do. Our weekly creatives call, and if you're in the LA area, our meetups that we sometimes have, which are always a lot of fun. So absolutely come and join us over there. I announce the picks on the first of the month. So if you want to find out what we are watching or listening to next, you can find that over on the Facebook group on the first. If you want to suggest something, I really like it when people suggest things to me. So you can find the form for that also on our Facebook. So kind of everything we do is over on Facebook. I think we actually have a mailing list if you're not on Facebook, but Beckett would need to provide more information on that. But without further ado, let's talk about Ainda estoy aquí, which is I'm still here. Had any of you guys seen this movie before?
No, I never even heard of this movie.
It was released last year, so it's a 2024 movie. I think it won Best International Film and was actually nominated for Best Feature and did not win. I would need to look into that. I do know that the lead actress was nominated for Best Actress.
Yeah, it's the first Brazilian movie to win Best Foreign Film.
Yeah, and I think it's absolutely well deserved. Did you guys like this movie?
I loved it. Are you still getting an echo?
No, well, let me talk so I can. No, I'm not getting an echo.
Okay. I loved it. I was very upset. Well, not upset. I was very verklempt at the end.
Beckett, you seemed conflicted.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that I enjoyed it. I don't know. I like learning about history. I thought it was a little bit boring, but other than that, yeah, I love the story. I didn't know much about that period of Brazil's history. So
Yeah, I liked it a lot, but the slow pacing in the beginning did get to me. Like, I thought maybe the beginning could have been quicker in some way, and I'm not entirely sure if it needed two epilogues, but
Yes.
I think, yeah, I think overall I enjoyed it, especially the middle part when things actually start happening.
I enjoyed the start of it. I think it did go on a little bit too long. It does have two epilogues, which does feel like quite a lot. Um, I do really respect Eunice Paiva, and I think that a lot of the epilogue was just to tell you more about her, but it doesn't feel like it was necessary for the story at all. Um,
yeah, I don't think it was necessary, but I really enjoyed the second epilogue because it was like, what is the culmination of a life? What even is the point? And it's
Right.
the family that she's gathered around her despite everything that happened. So I liked
Yeah,
that part. That made me smile.
yeah,
I
I did.
also really like that she became a lawyer at 48.
Hmm. Yeah, I do like the second epilogue. I think it works on a metaphorical level in terms of how she has Alzheimer's disease, and it seems like the movie might be metaphorically saying that parts of the world have Alzheimer's when it comes to dictatorships, like how fascists just keep getting reelected or elected, and people just, for some reason, seem to forget how horrible it is living in a dictatorship. So I think it works on a metaphorical level, and I did get emotional at the end when she's watching TV and recognizing her husband. Um, but yeah, that's what I'll say about that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
and
didn't even think about that angle. That's a good point. Because it's like these steps in history keep repeating. It's like we can never remember it for whatever reason.
I actually even said in the post when I selected this movie that I actually know very little about the Brazilian military dictatorship, which is interesting because, I mean, I feel like I grew up knowing a lot about dictatorships. My dad makes the joke of I accidentally went on a tour of like dead dictators when I was a kid. Um, and like Brazil just somehow escaped that. So did Indonesia, and I've recently started learning more about these like two things and just like the anti-communist kind of thing that's going on because that's how they were making all these people disappear, was saying that they were fighting communism. Um,
Yeah, I didn't know about the Brazilian dictatorship either, which is interesting because possibly my favorite movie ever is City of God, and that takes place in the 70s in Brazil. And I just had no idea that all the gangster stuff was happening during a dictatorship. Um, but I will also say the early beach scenes felt very similar to some scenes in City of God where the kids are at the beach because they take place at the same time, like the early 70s. But anyway, yeah, I also just had no idea about this Brazilian dictatorship.
I think that in this country, the Brazilian dictatorship gets sideshowed by the Chilean dictatorship that comes on 8 years later. Well, no, not 8 years, 6 years later. Brazilian dictatorships in '64, and then I think it's. Oh no, I'm sorry. No, it was it. I can't remember, but when Salvador Allende was removed from power, democratically elected president of Chile is removed from power, with the U.S. playing a much larger role than they played in Brazil. Um, and then what happens afterward. And it might be an age thing. It might be when you grew up and when your parents grew up and what they remember. But the Chilean dictatorship, general, whose name is escaping me right now, the oppression of the Chilean people was horrific and in your face, and we knew that our country had its hand deep, deep, deep in that overthrow. So I think that's why in this country, I think we don't remember the Brazilian dictatorship, because the Chilean dictatorship was far more omnipresent in the culture.
I think that we just don't talk about it because I think that we as Americans don't learn a lot about South America in general. And granted, like, I grew up in Eastern Europe, so I had a lot different prevalence of dictatorships. But yeah, I just feel like there is a huge gap in historical knowledge because it's South America. And we think a lot less about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm Mexican and I grew up in Southern California, and I had to wait till college until I took a Mexican history class. So
one of
it
the
just
things that,
wasn't, Latin America is not really taught here.
one of the things that I do want to talk about with this movie is just how good of a job Fernanda Torres did with her acting. That was the end of that statement. I think she did a phenomenal job.
She did, and it's a very well constructed character in the script. I mean, I know that from what I hear, you guys didn't appreciate the first act very much. I loved the first act. Yeah. I think my emotional reaction to what happens in the second act is because I just completely fell in love with this family, which was so unlike the way I grew up. These were just really good people. At least that's how they're presented in the film. They're a good family. They're a loving family. They all take care of each other. The only hint in the first act that we have of what's to come is when the kids in the car get pulled over by the military. But that's the one, kind of icky thing that happens in the first act. But the rest of the time, it's just getting comfortable and getting intimate with this wonderful family. And that just increases the level of horror show that comes in the second act. And they construct her, and what her character, once her husband disappears, the way her character stands and how she hides her own personal feelings to protect her kids. And I just, it's hard to keep it from her older daughter, and then, the next older daughter once the one moves to London. But aside from that, the other kids, they work so hard at shielding them from the awfulness that's going on.
And it's interesting because this is based on a memoir from the son, from Marcelo Paiva. This is based on his memoir that was released in 2015, which I believe was actually like just before the death of Eunice.
It said she died in 2018, I think.
Yeah.
At the very end.
So it is interesting that this is based on a memoir from somebody who was being shielded from this entire event, and is probably a lot based on like what he was told later on and like understanding. And there's a really interesting scene in the first epilogue, I think 25 years later, when they finally allowed him to die, and like death certificate and absentee, where they're talking about when did you bury him, like when did you know he wasn't coming back. And just the fact that it took him like a year and a half to recognize that his dad was never coming back and was probably dead, I think shows how well they hit it. But I also like the start of this and just like the reminder that like even in a dictatorship and even though terrible things are happening, like kids are still kids. You're still meeting with friends. Like life is still going on in those time frames. I really like Dairy Girls for that exact same vibe where there's just tons of terrible things going on. But they're still
Yeah.
teenagers, so
That's kind of because I knew where this was going.
Mhm.
Like I said, I didn't know much about the time period or the Brazilian dictatorship, but I knew, obviously where the story was headed. But in the beginning, it felt very timely to potentially where this country's heading right now and how, like, despite everything that's going on, and yes, you're seeing like military vehicles rolling down the streets and men with guns walking around everywhere and like brutalizing people, life goes on. You still got to live, you still got to survive, you still have your kids to take care of. So,
it's a very easy thing to ignore
yeah.
when you're very focused on your own life, or just going to the movies with your friends until all of a sudden you're reminded of it. And
Yeah,
even then, she's just like, man, they were being mean today.
Yeah. I mean, and especially for the kids, right? Like they are more or less clueless. The adults have, greater understanding of what's happening. And even then with, gosh, I forget her character, the woman, her name, whatever. Even then she's still shielded, right? Because her husband is the one who is trying to resist in small ways.
In a very small way, in a way that like wasn't affecting the government whatsoever.
And they still killed him for it.
Yeah, he was delivering letters from people that had disappeared so that their family could know where they were or that they were okay. And also because I think he opposed it before. He opposed it before it came into place and then was exiled.
That's right. He was a senator who...
Yeah. He was like...
he was a senator at the time of the coup.
Yes. And it's just like, this has no effect on you. This is not threatening you at all. So it is like a weird kind of timely thing. I wonder if that has something to do with why they released it at this time. As a reminder.
You said it was released last year, though?
Yes. So I have the notes here. This was released in September of 2024. But it is a Brazilian movie. It was made in Brazil, by a Brazilian. So it's not so much like, oh, they're making this now because history always repeats itself. I think it just happened along that way. And I think one of the reasons it gained so much traction, because a lot of movies like this tend to like get swept under the rug or like are very, very small in the people it gets to. There's a very specific audience for, historical movies along this line. And I think this one really did break into the international market in a way that I don't usually see movies like this doing. So I do think that's an interesting, like, why this one kind of thing. And maybe it is because like the acting is very good and it's shot very well as well. I don't have a lot of complaints with the filmmaking or the acting or anything along those lines. I think my only complaint is that they spent a lot of time on the end explaining, instead of like the standard with this of doing everything as an overlay to tell you what happened at the end. Right before the credits roll, they decided to actually show it. And that's more of a me problem than it is a problem with the movie.
I think it might. Yes, it's timely because we're watching it while what's happening here is happening. but at the time of the release, right wing movements within the European countries have been making big advances, and so this shadow of right wing authoritarianism has been present since the last Trump administration. So yeah, and it's interesting what Derek said made that connection to memory, because I was so connected to Eunice's character and feeling for her that I missed the larger metaphor that her Alzheimer's was a comment on our collective memory. I'm glad you called my attention, because that went right by me until you said that, and I was like, oh yeah. How did I miss that?
It could also be a nod back to the memoir that Marcelo wrote, which I believe deals more with his mother's Alzheimer's and then the memories that she remembers with it. So it could also have just been a nod to that.
Yeah, I will say.
I feel like, oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, it's kind of like I enjoy the idea of the metaphor more than the execution, because I think having two epilogues is a bit of an awkward structure. And I looked at the timeline I think when the first epilogue started, and there was still like 20 minutes or probably over 20 minutes left in the movie at that point, and it just felt like a bit of an awkward way when there's usually at that time in a movie it's time for the denouement or whatever, and it's just a bit of an awkward structure. I thought maybe, as I was thinking about it, not that I know how to do everything better than these filmmakers, but I thought maybe it could be structured a bit differently to make it work better. Like in terms of the Alzheimer's, it could use a nonlinear structure where where it opens with her with Alzheimer's, and it sort of is mostly told in flashbacks. That would just be an alternate structure that would help make the ending feel like it was executed better, in my opinion. But of course, there could be many other ways to do it. I just think the structure is a bit too awkward at the end.
It's almost like they're not exactly sure what to focus on. Like, is the focus on Eunice? Is the focus on the disappearance? Is the focus on the family as a whole? The memory of it? Like, where is the plot for this movie at? And because it is like a real life scenario, and you want to portray it the way that it actually, happened, it kind of doesn't have a concise plot from start to finish. It kind of feels like just a series of things that you're watching. And so I also think I would have liked it more in the way that you are describing it, where you start with the Alzheimer's and like go back over time, which would allow you to jump through those times in a different way. Because there's a lot going on, and I feel like it didn't. The movie is called I'm Still Here, but I almost get the feeling like we didn't focus on her enough, even though she is the main focus of it. Like, she is extremely poised. Like, she maintains the same level in front of her kids. She's definitely shielding them. She is putting on a front this entire time. Really, the only time that we really see her break is, like, I think she sheds like a single tear at one point, and then the shower after she gets out from being held.
But part of her genius, part of her craft is, she doesn't break, but I think what she feels, even if she doesn't reveal it openly, I think it plays on her face. I think if you're paying attention to her face and her body language, you always see it there. She's just not openly revealing it to her kids. in a way that it's obvious to them. For being
And
for her family. But I think the things that the awfulness that she's feeling, she plays it. It's all there, but you have to be aware and look for it and see it. And that's part of the genius of this performance.
oh yeah, Fernanda Torres did a phenomenal job. But from a plot standpoint, I wish that we did get to see behind the curtain a little bit more. Um, just as more of a deep dive into that kind of shielding practice.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. And like kind of what made the movie feel a little boring to me, even though it is very tense and there's, you know, this underlying kind of dread throughout the entire, like even in the beginning, because you're like, oh my God, what's going to happen? Even in Act One. The tension isn't really used that much. It's like there, but I feel like it's underutilized. So maybe having some kind of insight into, you know, the background and what she's feeling underneath would have helped with that a little bit. I don't know.
I frequently expected him to cut to scenes where she was alone and would then reveal, you know, to us, the viewer, what she was feeling. I don't think they were necessary, but I think that's the choice most filmmakers would have made. An American filmmaker definitely would have made that choice. So I like the subtlety of that, but at the same time, I get exactly what you're saying, and maybe a little bit of me would have wanted to see it. But I just think it presented a great opportunity for the actor playing Eunice to you know, show that incredible that dichotomy through body language and facial expressions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this kind of can act as a study of character from perhaps the kid's perspective, because it is based on a book written by one of them. And, you know, that's how they would have seen her. It's, you know, stoic and level-headed and, you know, taking care of the situation. But yeah, in movies like this, I feel like the tension should be its own character, and I don't feel like it was.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what people are saying, and I think Fernanda Torres is perfect in the role, and I like how she hides emotions, because that's kind of what you have to do in a dictatorship, and it's also what she feels she has to do for her kids. And oh, is that the real one? Oh yeah, the
Yeah,
real one.
that's the picture from it.
Oh.
I brought this up because I actually really like this scene and about like her putting on a face for it of just refusing to be sad.
Mm-hmm.
And I was also going to say I saw a short YouTube video that was not a direct interview with the director, but it was someone relaying what the director said. So it's coming secondhand. But anyway, apparently the director wanted to show the mother Eunice's quiet resistance by being kind to people and, you know, like protecting her family with kindness. And he thought that was the true way to resist a dictatorship. But I will say to like Beckett's point, it is like in a traditional movie, the protagonist would be more active, I would say, because it does come off as like a passive movie where a lot of things keep happening to Eunice and to her family, but she doesn't really accomplish much in terms of her actual goals. Like, she doesn't get information about her husband until later. Like, she gets some information from the journalist, but she doesn't get the death certificate until years later in the first epilogue, and it kind of happens. It just sort of happens in the movie. It doesn't come from direct action that she's taking, so it is a bit of a passive movie in that sense. Of course, I wouldn't want her to just become an action star and just rescue her husband by the end, because that wouldn't be realistic. But it's still, it goes back to what I was saying about the structure being a bit awkward. In terms of like having a passive protagonist, that also is a bit awkward.
I would agree with that, and I think that something that may have helped that, because it does feel kind of like everything is just happening to her and around her, and maybe that was intentional, on the part of the filmmakers, but having her play a more active role, and because instead of like just doing a slate that says she was a lawyer who fought for civil rights and of those who were affected by the dictatorship, whatever, show it, like the old adage of show don't tell. Like, we didn't get to see her do any of that.
Well, we did. We get to see her do that in the classroom.
Yeah, that happened afterwards. She went back to college at the end of this. So when she moved at the end, that's when she went to law school. Mm-hmm. So she didn't do any of that until afterwards. And so I assume the first epilogue was to show what she went into. And she went into something very, very interesting. She fought for land rights. Yeah, that's true. I forgot about that part. It was like 5 minutes of the movie. Yeah, and it felt weird, but honestly, now that we're talking about it, it is absolutely the show versus tell version of it. And she stops the call to tell that they got the death certificate in it, which is something that I want to go back to because it is interesting. It was 25 years after the fact, and they identified who killed him and just did not do anything about it. They were never prosecuted. And in fact, there is an entire list of people that disappeared underneath this, like under this regime, and nobody faced any consequences for it on the flip side.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons that first prologue worked for me very effectively is because they have her say, "I'm going back to school," and they don't say why. Now I instantly think, "Oh, she's going to be a lawyer." I knew, I knew that she was going to law school, just on a guess. But being clever that way and not saying, "Yes, I'm going to be a lawyer," but then giving us the prologue, that's the kicker into the prologue, and then we see her doing that class presentation about the land rights.
I guess it was a little muddied for me. I didn't really get all of that until the slate at the end that explained she was an activist lawyer who fought for indigenous land rights. I was like, oh, is that what that meant? Okay.
That's interesting because I saw that card as being redundant. I didn't even think that title card needed to be there because it was so obvious to me. But again, that's why the second prologue doesn't really work, because we don't really have a kicker into that second prologue. So it just gets thrown at us, and it could have been handled better. It was weird. It was kind of like why I hated the girl with the dragon tattoo, both the book and the movie, because it doesn't know where to end. It ends and then gives you 20 more minutes of additional endings afterwards. But when you're trying to be, I don't know that this is how faithful this is to the actual story or to the son's book, but when you're trying to really stick with the actual story, you wind up with these kind of difficulties. I've spent 10 years working on a script about a woman who had many different chapters in her lives, and the biggest roadblock of getting through the whole story is, how do I kick into the next section of the story, which seems so completely independent from this woman's life, unless you look at her life as a whole, and then you can see the arc. But it's hard to jump between these sections of a person's life when they're so radically different.
And I would also think, the more I think about it, this is mostly about her when she wasn't able to support herself after her husband's disappearance. She couldn't get money out from the bank without his approval, but he didn't exist anymore. So how would she go about that? She doesn't have the death certificate, so she can't do anything about it. And ultimately, she had to go back and live with her parents, which is what she was doing at the end. They moved back in because she needed support from somewhere. She sold the house because it was the only way, because she knew the people doing it. And so it kind of all happened under the table. And so all of this, her going back to school, her doing this, is just her on like the flip end of this, trying to do something to support her family, because throughout this entire movie, she was just trying to make ends meet and couldn't do anything because of her husband's disappearance.
Yeah.
And so I think her getting the degree and that first epilogue are really important for that part of the story. It's almost like it's wrapping up that specific plot line. And then the second one wraps up the actual plot line of the movie, dealing with the disappearance. The more we talk about it, the more I understand why there was two, but I had the same thing that Derek, where I was just like, oh, clearly this movie's almost over. Wait, I have 25 minutes left.
I gotta say, I got when they get the, you know, I mean, it's no secret, we as the audience and her, we know he's dead, and yet I got very emotional when she finally gets that death certificate. I guess I was experiencing the same relief that she was, to finally have this one thing that proves everything that, you know. And I was and there's that interesting thing that I think we as an audience have to think about how happy she is to have that, because I have expected her to break down and weep, that she's, and in a way that she's finally coming to terms with her husband's death in a way that she wasn't able to. And yet there's this sense of closure that she has that makes her happy, to have that thing that I guess it gives her life back. I'm not
it's
sure.
It's an acknowledgement by the government of what happened, because they denied for 25 years that you know, that he was even dead.
They also lied about it repeatedly while it was happening.
Yeah.
I'm unsure about the timeline.
Or however long until she was able to finally get, you know, confirmation from them. But
yeah, I think he died the first day they had him. They took him out and abducted him and then killed him immediately.
Yeah, I remember seeing that on it may have been like a couple of days or a day or whatever, because they very quickly tortured and then killed him. But like continued to lie to her and everyone and not even acknowledge that he was dead for decades. So I feel like her feelings about obtaining that document is probably more complicated than she lets on, being who she is and the way that she has handled everything else thus far. But you know, she knew, you know, even before I think the reporter told her, she knew what was going to happen.
But also, there's a scene right after she gets the death certificate where she's talking to a journalist, and she talks about how there needs to be reparations for the families of the people that disappeared during this time frame and who suffered during this time frame.
Yeah. And in order for that to happen, also, you need acknowledgement from those who were
Yeah, I think she saw that as the first step, and in the end of the story, there actually weren't any, because the people, even though they were recognized, weren't punished. There is also the side thing of, you know, the person who's handling her when she's being held is actually like relatively nice to her and does state information to her, and at one point goes, I don't agree with any of this. And so it's a very complicated subject when it comes to these kind of things. There are some people that are just trying to get by that are also on the inside of the mess.
Yeah.
You know, an important observation from that, because I was thinking about that when it was happening. You know, what's going on in DC and what happened in LA a lot of our soldiers don't want to be there. They're there because they have to. They don't have a choice. They have to follow the orders. And people who haven't been in the military can, say, oh, well, you have a choice, but it's not that simple. It's very complex. And that guy, that character was willing to break that silence for a brief moment just so that she could have some sense that there were people inside the system that did not believe in what was happening. That had to give that character, the real person, if that character is real, that had to give her some little bit of sense of solace that there's somebody, that it's not all crazy, that there are people inside that don't buy this stuff that's going on, just as there are people inside our military who do not agree but have no choice but to do what they do in this time.
So I think it's important to note this wasn't something that they talked about in the film, but it is related to what we're talking about now. She became a lawyer specifically because she wanted to lead campaigns to open archives on the military regime, and she did this while the military regime was still in place. She was watched for 13 years by the military because of these efforts. And the 25 years later was her finally succeeding in it, in at least the first part of it. And I feel like you see that a little bit in how deep she gets into looking for her husband, but she continued to do that for other people as well. And until 1984.
Wow.
In 1996, they finally compelled, but she was watched until 1984. So, yeah. And I mean, that's pretty much until the end of the dictatorship. So she was watched through the entire thing. Very, very vocal opponent to it.
And that took balls.
Oh, absolutely. And I imagine the poise that she has and her ability to continue to stand tall in the face of everything and show very little signs of breaking, honestly probably helped her a lot in that. And it's probably the reason why her son saw her that way. I read a little bit over here on my other screen about the memoir in a little bit more detail, and it's mostly about his complicated relationship with his mom, who didn't tell him a lot, and he had to unearth a lot of these things while going through her stuff while she had Alzheimer's. She was very closed off, and I think that affected her relationship with her children.
That last sequence, the second prologue, when we see him looking at his mom while she's watching the TV, I just found that so moving. Him realizing, and maybe in that moment recognizing in a way that he hadn't before what she had accomplished, and also where she was at now. It's another one where what the character does with his face, what the actor does with his face, because he's in a wheelchair, so we don't have the body language necessary that we would have in another character. So it plays on his face the things that he's feeling about his mother in that moment. There was so much about this film that moved me, but that was just another example that stood out.
Yeah, with what Rebecca was saying, well, first of all, I did enjoy this movie, but as she was talking about the memoir, it did just kind of, and of course I don't know anything about the memoir. I haven't even read a summary of it, but um, what she was describing kind of made me wish that the movie itself had more focus, like what someone was saying, how it could be from the children's point of view, and I kind of wish it leaned into that more, like made it I don't know, like maybe just picked a more of a focus in some way. Um, but, but yeah, you do like she was saying how the writer of the memoir sort of resented or like had some complications with how Eunice hid information from the kids. You do get some of that with the teenage girls who um, argue with their mother whenever they find out that she hid information from them. But still, like, I don't know. Like, hearing about the memoir kind of makes me wish the movie was a bit more focused on the children's point of view or something. I don't know. Just some kind of focus um, is what I would want. But again, it probably sounds like I'm criticizing the movie too much, but I still enjoyed it. Like on a scene by scene basis, I enjoyed what I was seeing. Cinematography was amazing. I liked the parts where the girls were dancing to French music, etc. Like there was a lot to like about this movie.
Yeah, I really loved the set decoration. Like these this family's home like felt like so lived in. Just you could yeah, it felt so authentic and definitely of that time.
Reminded me of a lot of Roma in a way. In fact, a lot of things
Yeah.
about this film reminded me of Roma in a very positive way. Another film that I absolutely loved. There's another recent film about a similar topic from Iran that was absolutely phenomenal. If you want to get a sense, and it's again, you have two teenage daughters who are dealing with what's going on, and that's The Seed of the Sacred Fig. Just an absolutely fantastic film about living in that kind of world of oppression, of national oppression.
Sorry, I'm trying to keep track of all of my tabs over here, and then like I have to stay on something that has a white screen, or else I disappear entirely.
This film just moved me. I was already in an emotional state anyway because of things that have gone on in my life this week. But I felt for these characters and for this story, and it really struck home with me in its relationship to what I mean. This is not a new story. We've seen this story.
Sorry, gonna go ahead and mute Beckett because that was very loud.
It's not the first time we've seen this kind of story with these kind of characters reacting towards this situation. But I don't think I've ever felt as emotional towards one like this because of what we're seeing in this country right now. I just sat there thinking, oh my God, this is us if we don't head this off in the next couple of years. This is what we will have to live with. And I think that's what left me so floored throughout this entire movie, which is why I may have missed some of the things that that you guys weren't comfortable with, or weren't you felt were problems with structure. Those things went completely over my head because I was so emotionally tied to this story and these characters because of the world that we live in right now.
Sorry.
Oh, and I'm sorry. Another thing that I was thinking about because of what Derek said about the passivity or activity of the lead character. And I would normally agree with you 100%, but I think what's key in this story is that in this situation, you don't have the room to be that kind of active character. At the very least, if you are an active character, the way the men in the story before her husband is kidnapped, the way they're not super secretive and tucking into dark corners and having conversations. It all feels very casual, but if you're paying attention, you can see they're very careful about the places where they have these kinds of conversations. So I think the passivity is indicative of the particular situation that these characters find themselves in.
I also think that, we're so used to seeing all of this action and like this very straightforward plot, and people really like to see that kind of thing. It's why, old man action exists. It's people really like to see that and believe that they can like have those things happen, but the actual fights that are going on are very, very subtle, very, very nuanced, and very, very unseen, as they should be. Honestly, anything that you see as soon as it happens in real life is relatively boring. And I think this movie does a really, really good job of showing that like kind of nuance and the closed offness and the slowness of this fight.
Yeah, I don't think that it necessarily has to be like action for it to be, engaging. It's more, for me, it was more of, like I mentioned, how the tension wasn't really there for me. I don't know, and maybe that was just my perception. But I feel like there could have been more to do with that.
I think you'll love The Seed of the Sacred Fig, because that tension never goes away. That tension starts pulling and it never goes away throughout that entire film.
All right, so we are coming up on an hour here, so I do want to know if anybody has any final thoughts or things that they really want to discuss before we close out for the evening.
Yeah, well, I was very interested to learn that this director right here, who you see on the screen, is the third richest director in the world. He's a billionaire. Only Steven Spielberg and George Lucas are richer than him, because he's an heir to a banking fortune. Not from So it was very surprising to learn that this director of like small foreign movies, the only one I had heard of that he made before this was The Motorcycle Diaries, which I haven't seen. But usually the director of this type of movie would not be a billionaire. But so yeah, I had to read more about, because when Wikipedia just tossed that in there near the end of his biography or something, and it seemed like a mistake, because it's just such a weird thing to think that this guy is a billionaire. But yeah.
I mean, he did a great job, and he's not listed as a producer, which is also kind of weird for being a billionaire. Usually they're self-funded projects a lot of the time. So that's actually really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And these are the kind of characters that his films always deal with. He doesn't do films about big, powerful people. He tends to do films about people who are living under the effects of big, powerful people.
Yeah, and I mean, he really experienced this dictatorship because he was 15 when he returned to Brazil, which was still under the dictatorship. So he lived this experience, and I think 15 is a really good age to simultaneously not know anything and to know way too much about a situation. Everything when you're 15 feels normalized.
There was a moment in the film where I had a big smile on my face. The family has just received a letter from the daughter who lives in London, and she's talking about some important person at one of the parties, and the first they say Caetano and or Gil, which is Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil, who were very important in the Tropicana movement of music in Brazil. Caetano wound up in prison Actually, I think both Caetano and Gilberto Gil wound up in prison because they were accused of representing singing the national anthem in an offensive manner. But both of them were, important for the people who were being oppressed during the oppression because of how they stood up artistically to the regime. You just go check them out. Gilberto Gil and Caetano Veloso. One of Pedro Almodovar's films, Talk to Her. There's a wonderful sequence where the characters are in the backyard at a party, and everybody is surrounding this singer, and it's Caetano Veloso, and he sings Cucurucucú, Paloma, which is it's a sort of folk song that a lot of people recorded back in the 50s. And I heard it as a kid in a version by an Irish guy named John Gary. And it always seemed a little bit corny. And Veloso sings this song, and he turns this kind of hokey folk song into this stunningly beautiful piece. I mean, just go look up Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil and check out their music. If you like bossa nova and Brazilian music and samba and that kind of thing, it'll be a great experience for you. I just got the biggest smile when they didn't say. I thought they were going to say, was it John Lennon? I was thinking they were going to say it's John Lennon. They said, was it Caetano? Was it Gilberto Gil? I thought that was wild. That I just loved it. So
didn't we listen to a bossa nova album by Gilberto Gil?
I know that Caetano Veloso is all over the soundtrack. I don't remember if there was a Gilberto Gil.
No.
Club.
João Gilberto. Gilberto was
Yeah.
So they were actually imprisoned together at the same time.
Yeah.
So both of them were imprisoned for this, and then became very, very active afterwards.
Yeah. Gil has passed away. Caetano Veloso is still alive and still
Yes.
performing.
But I don't want to get too much off topic.
Too late.
Sorry about that.
Any final thoughts before we end for the evening?
Well, let me give you a diatribe on 70s bossa nova before we close out.
Oh, you were just joking.
I'm going to assume that means that we have completed our discussion. So
I have one other thing before we go.
Mhm.
Did everybody? I'm betting I'm the only one, but I could be wrong. Did everybody recognize when the guy who was in charge of their home after they kidnapped the husband, when he looked through the albums, did everybody recognize the album he stopped on?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well,
King Crimson.
Crimson.
Yeah.
In the Court of the Crimson Crim, the first King Crimson album, which was probably not something that the military powers thought very fondly of. If they saw that in your collection, they probably thought you were not a good person.
Yeah, and I mean that was the daughter's entire deal. I mean, she even sent an album back, and that was probably not going to pass inspection either. There are a lot of very, very it's the production design on this is very detailed. There are a lot of small little hints into who the Paivas are as like people that are never really like discussed up front, that kind of just show that they were just revolutionaries at heart in a way.
But they seem like such. I mean, I think that's so endearing about them is they did seem like just a normal family.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they are just a normal family. But they definitely are an intellectual family, and they don't abide by the rules of the regime. And I think that's very, very upfront in the way that the production is played.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I want to thank you guys for joining me. I'm glad that you enjoyed the movie, and I hope to catch you on the next one.
Bye.
Sorry I talked so much.